Hello, my name is Bobby Macaulay. I work at the Centre for Mountain Studies at the University of the Highlands and Islands. What I'm going to speak about today is just the kind of preliminary results from two different data collection exercises that we did. One was in a previous webinar that we conducted on the ETRAC project. And the other one was during an online survey, which is still live now, and I'll give you a link for that at the end of this presentation, for if anyone wants to contribute to that, which would be very helpful. But this was really just collecting data on the impacts of the pandemic on ethical tourism and opportunities and the recovery from that as well. So in terms of the impacts, perhaps understandably the most significant one was financial. It was particularly around loss of business, loss of income, from having to shut down during various different lockdowns, and from international restrictions, meaning that international visitors could not come. International tourism was severely limited. There was also, in particular, with a lot of people having to be laid off and losing their jobs and businesses closing during the lockdown, during the kind of height of the pandemic. When businesses did reopen again, actually there was particular difficulties in trying to recruit staff back into the industry. And there still is particular difficulties in recruitment to be able to really drive forward with the recovery from the pandemic, because there's just far more demand than supply of labour in the industry. What the groups that were seen to have been impacted most greatly from this were young people and women, who are disproportionately represented in service industries and in hospitality, and were also tended to be the ones that were the first to lose their jobs, and are also the ones that are tending not to come back into the tourism industry. So aside from the kind of financial aspect, the impact very much of the international restrictions has been that the international market has been severely curtailed and continues to be very difficult to attract people. Even now that international restrictions are easing, actually there's a social side of this as well, whereby people are still a little bit nervous about traveling, about flying especially, to international destinations. And on the flip side of that, simultaneously, as the domestic market does not want to leave and still wants to go on holiday somewhere, then the domestic market has absolutely skyrocketed. and very much tourism businesses across the region we're looking at have had a simultaneous loss of international customers and an increase in domestic customers. And that has had slight impacts in terms of expectations and what people are wanting and the types of products people are looking for within the countries. And that's kind of impacted upon what demand there is for certain businesses doing certain things. As well, with the kind of type of customers, you have a big shift towards outdoor tourism. I think that's partly because of the dangers of being indoors, of the virus being able to transmit much more easily. But also because people were very aware during lockdowns of the importance of green space and outdoor activity. And so a lot of their holidays have also been about trying to find that open space and kind of more nature-based tourism. There has been reported heightened expectations, partly in terms of the quality of tourism product being offered, but also in terms of cleanliness, especially with hospitality and accommodation. the standards of cleanliness demanded by tourists have been reported to have increased, again because of concerns about the virus. And I think what has been already reported by Natasha and Rachel today already is very much the increased importance of digital tools and digital presence in the tourist offering, whether that's around marketing, whether it's about networking, whether it's about the particular products being offered. The impact of this has been that businesses have very much had to focus more on their digital presence. In terms of opportunities then, due to this, what was noted was that especially in places where a kind of a furlough scheme was provided and the opportunity to take a step back from having to work constantly, and a recognition that actually tourism at the height of the pandemic was not viable to continue doing, it's allowed a little bit of time for people to reflect on the nature of tourism, the approach to tourism, the philosophy around it, its purpose and what it's for. And this is partly in response to the restrictions we now find ourselves living in, but it's partly also just thinking about what tourism can do in terms of its impacts on communities and its kind of role within the market. So very much what was coming through the survey was people starting to look differently about their business and its role. Alongside this, there was a response to a demand for a different type of tourism, and again, as noted before, this was partly to do with the restrictions and the response to them, but it was also seen as an opportunity for businesses to shift the way they work. So the demand, various different aspects of it, a demand for local tourism, people staying much closer, people having an interest in their local area and learning more about it. Natural, nature-based tourism in green spaces, environmentally conscious. Now, whether that's about reducing transport emissions or the type of accommodation that they're staying in or the type of activities that they're doing, it's changing the relationship there and the products that are demanded. And a more authentic experience. So it might be about slowing down tourism, or it might be about learning a lot more about a particular topic there that was seen as an opportunity for businesses to try and harness that demand. And then, as mentioned before, virtual tourism. So whether that's about people visiting virtually, using digital tools to visit different places, or whether it was about opportunities for learning more or collaborating in marketing schemes or networking. There's just a quote there from a response to the survey, very much about networking and understanding opportunities in tourism using digital infrastructure and kind of virtual means. In terms of the recovery from the pandemic, I mean, in many ways, we are still in the midst of the recovery. The restrictions are easing, but are very much still there. And I'm aware of a spike in cases in mainland Europe, certainly. So we are recovering, but we're still mid-pandemic in many ways. And there was a recognition that recovery is ongoing, but it is difficult. The situation is still hard to forecast, says this quote, so looking ahead is quite challenging. And also businesses have really struggled and continue to struggle and are hanging on financially. And looking forward to the winter, depending on what your tourism offering is, often winter is quite a quiet time in tourism, then it might be particularly difficult. In terms of what was asked for, what was seen as necessary to keep businesses alive, and trading was this continued financial assistance. I'm aware in the UK of government assistance for businesses. I know that there are similar schemes elsewhere, but very much seen as a need for continued financial assistance for businesses, but also for more kind of regional and strategic funding. So whether it's for regional infrastructure, whether it's for local councils or local government, to continue to support the infrastructure and the industry more broadly, rather than just focusing in on individual businesses themselves. There was a need for support and guidance within the industry, as well as from external stakeholders. So very much the industry needs to take a lead on guiding businesses, guiding opportunities, support for retraining and recruitment, and various various other support from an industry side. And then drilling down again into the need for businesses themselves to take responsibility for adapting their business practices, what they see as opportunities, what they see as this new world, this new market, as being able to provide in terms of opportunities and a way to recover. There was a reported need for research and knowledge sharing, is what I've called it, but people said they wanted to know what was happening elsewhere. They wanted to know how the recovery was happening in different places, in different countries, what other businesses were doing, what opportunities were being looked into, and how that knowledge could be shared and disseminated to support the industry more broadly. And then that's kind of related to this idea of networks and building off each other, not in direct competition, but in collaboration, to work out best practice, to work out what other people are doing, to share resources and to share knowledge. And that was very much seen as important for that recovery as well. That kind of aspect of impacts and opportunities and recovery was very much the structure of our data collection especially in the previous webinar. But what came through the survey as well was something maybe slightly unexpected, and it was focusing on the future and how ethical tourism, how important it is to adopt these practices. And this was something that I thought very much came through in Petri's presentation, bringing together that very much that community focus that Roz commented on as well. In that, when people were speaking about the future and how tourism must evolve, there was kind of three main, very much overlapping themes that came out, and that was around ethical, sustainable, and community-focused tourism. So I've just picked out a few quotes here from the responses, and it's very much focusing on the need for tourism to be locally sourced, locally focused, locally benefiting, as well as that kind of environmental aspect and the sustainability of both business and the environment and a local population as well, which is of particular difficulty in, I know, some regions of Scotland and other regions that are struggling with depopulation. But very much bringing together those three aspects of ethical, sustainable, community-focused businesses to really bring the community in and enhance the tourism product that they're offering through that, but also deliver some of the benefits back to them. So it's not this antagonism between tourism and local people that we have seen during the pandemic, especially when there is a need for tourism businesses to bring people in from outside, and often the fear within remote, rural, island communities of these incomers, of people coming in with the virus that could be dangerous to them and the recovery within those communities. That that's it in terms of an overview of our findings. As I say, we'd very much like you to fill in the survey if you haven't already done so. We have the version in English and in Finnish. And if you have any other questions, then that's my own email address and Rose's email address at the top there. But I'm not sure of the time we're at. But if you have any questions about our research just now as well, then I'd be very happy to answer them. And apologies again for the difficulties with the technology at the start there.